Hey everybody. For my astronomy lesson, I'm going to be doing a little video about Pluto. This is a planet, well, not a planet anymore, but a celestial object that has always interested me, mostly just because of its position on the outside of the solar system. It's kind of a black sheep, and I just figured I'd do a little video on it because it's always been a topic of interest for me. So we're just going to be talking a little bit about Pluto, some basic information, a bit about why it's no longer considered a planet, and some fun facts about it. Just a little discussion. So, Pluto was first discovered by a guy named Clyde Tombaugh in 1930. He wasn't actually looking for Pluto. He was looking for something that had been dubbed Planet X, which astronomers at the time believed was affecting the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. Turns out such a planet did not exist, and instead they found Pluto. Now, Pluto is a planet of extremes. Its distance from the sun is incredible. At aphelion, which is its furthest point from the sun, it is over 7 billion kilometers away. That is so far that light, or anything traveling at light speed, theoretically of course, would take 5 hours to reach it. For reference, light takes about 7 minutes to reach Earth. So the difference between 7 minutes and 5 hours is a lot. And that kind of is a good example of illustrating how Pluto is really, really far away. Also, it is extremely cold, again, due to its distance from the sun. Its average surface temperature is 40 Kelvin. That's about negative 233 degrees Celsius. So, anyone hypothetically landing on Pluto would instantly freeze. It would die immediately, because it's just not close enough to the sun to get any real heat. It's so cold, in fact, that the gases such as nitrogen and methane form ice on the planet. Their natural state of matter on Pluto is ice. But the gases are one of the reasons why Pluto is so unique, because when it gets a little closer to the sun, still about 4 billion kilometers away, but definitely closer, some of the ice on the surface of the planet evaporates and turns into a thin atmosphere. So, pretty incredible that something that far away from the sun that is that small can actually develop an atmosphere. As for the size of Pluto, it's about the size of half the United States. So it's smaller than our moon. It's a very, very small place. But it still managed to develop an atmosphere because of the massive difference between its aphelion and its perihelion. In fact, at perihelion, it sometimes actually gets closer to the sun than Neptune does. And this is one of the reasons why it's no longer considered a planet. It's one of the contributing factors, but I'll get to that later. So it's not actually a planet. It's classified as a dwarf planet. And it exists in an area that is known as the Kuiper Belt, which is farther away than any of the planets. It's on like the outer perimeter of our solar system. And it's made of usually just a bunch of small rocky objects. And Pluto is one of the larger ones in the Kuiper Belt. Some of the other things in the Kuiper Belt are, I have some stuff in here. There's this interesting thing here. It's called the Oort cloud. It's going to be backwards for you, but it's called the Oort cloud. and it's basically just a massive cloud of comets. It extends to almost a light year away from the sun. This is the area that Pluto is in. It's not as far away as some of those asteroids, but it's a cool, very mysterious place. Pluto is also, despite its size, it has 5 moons. The largest being Charon, which relative to Pluto is big. It's half the size of Pluto. Like, just imagine if the moon was half the size of the Earth. Imagine how big it would be in the sky. The size of Charon relative to Pluto is yet another reason why it's not considered a planet. And its size also gives it another interesting feature. It only has gravity that is 1/12 the strength of that on Earth. So, for example, if a man was 180 pounds on Earth, he would only be about 15 pounds on Pluto. So, very, very weak gravitational pull, again, due to its size. And now I think would be a good point to transition into some explanation about why Pluto is no longer a planet. There's a few main factors that contribute to its reclassification as a dwarf planet, which happened in 2006. One is that it seems, to astronomers, it seems strange that it would be a rocky object that far away from the sun if it were truly a planet, since all the other outer planets are gas giants. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are all primarily gas. Pluto is mostly solid rock. About 70% of its diameter is a rocky core. So because of that, there's a theory that Pluto was actually an alien object that managed to become trapped just barely in the sun's gravity, which kind of links to another reason it may not be considered a planet, which is its very erratic orbit. As I mentioned briefly earlier, Pluto, at its nearest and farthest point, there's a difference of almost 3 billion kilometers. So it has a very strange orbit. And usually planets do have varying orbits. For example, Mercury has a strange orbit, but most planets stay relatively within their orbit. They don't overlap each other, and Pluto sometimes gets closer to Neptune. It doesn't stay in one orbit around the sun. So that's another contributing factor. There are people that argue that the definition of planet is a little too vague, so Pluto can't really be classified at this point until the definition is refined. But right now it's classified as a dwarf planet. There's a couple fun facts I had here about Pluto. Some people believe that because Charon is so big, it's actually not a moon at all. Rather, it and Pluto are a set of dual planets that orbit around each other. So that's one theory. And of course, being so far away from the sun, very little light reaches Pluto, which means that it's very dark. So dark, in fact, that you could see stars 24/7. Like, in the daytime, you can see stars. So it's basically a perpetual night there. And despite its downgrade to a dwarf planet, Pluto's name actually holds great importance in Roman mythology. There are many planets that have significance and are named after Roman gods. Pluto in Roman mythology is the god of the underworld. And it is quite a fitting name for a planet so hazardous. Yeah, it's one of the main gods in Roman mythology. Pluto basically symbolizes death. Like I said, quite fitting, considering you freeze to death the instant you get onto it. That is most of what I had for Pluto. There's a few images in this book that I can show you really quick. So this is like a rough estimate of what Pluto may have looked like on the surface. There are photographs of it now, if you'd like to look those up. It has been photographed, and it's a pretty cool looking place. And here is a diagram of the layers of Pluto. So on this outside layer here are those frozen nitrogen and methane gases. They make a crust on the outside. Just inside a little bit, there is a layer of water ice, as opposed to the other ices on the surface. And then on the inside, you have your rocky core, which makes up the majority. That's about all I wanted to say about Pluto. So hopefully you've enjoyed this brief little lesson, and maybe I'll see you again. Goodbye.